Welcome, everybody. My name is Jordan Smith, and I am here with this lovely panel of my fellow EA astrologers. And we are going to be doing the sixth installment of this moon series titled Evolving the Moon Through the Houses and Signs. And for this episode, it is Virgo in the sixth house, Virgo Moon. And so I wanted to let everyone say hi. We have Joe Malloy,
Hi, everyone.
Rob Shahal,
Hi everyone.
Stacie Pazura,
Hello.
David Green,
Hello.
and then we have the wonderful Sue Hilliard working behind the scenes for us. So, Sue, if you'll go to the next slide for me. Oh, never mind. Go back. Sorry. I wanted to start us off with talking about, our favorite things about a Virgo moon. And to me, I find I have a moon in the sixth house, different sign, but I find that it's got its negatives and its positives like anything. But the things that I love most about the moon is, especially if I'm reflecting on childhood, was I always had this, it's something I feel proud about, this desire to make sure that I don't know, like I want to give the example of there was a girl in my class who her mom would put her in my class every year because she was made fun of and I didn't want her to be made fun of, so she became my best friend. I feel like a Virgo moon can really want to champion for the underdog or for those who are looked at as less than because on some level they've been there or they felt that deeply. I also love that a Virgo moon, it can be really solution based. It can go through trials and tribulations and it can get into some of the more negative expressions, but at the heart of it is it's really wanting to find a solution. So if you guys have other things to add, I don't want to like keep talking about my moon particularly. Rob, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, being such a strong Virgo, I can completely resonate with what it represents. And it's like you said, it's to be of service, but to in service of others, right? It's that humility that a Virgo moon essentially has. And it's because there's an innate knowing that we're all here to be of service, to help others evolve. But that inner sense of wanting to be of service also, in a way, links to that void that's felt. Like there's a need to fill that gap within that can be like an extensional void. And it's to help the underdog, like you said, but to kind of to help, but because it not only helps the other person, but also makes the person feel good because they're helping somebody grow, evolve, but also just connect with that sense of being the human nature of oneness, the polarity of Virgo being Pisces. So surrendering to the fact that we're all one and helping another in a way, you're also helping yourself, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes with a Virgo moon, if you're not being able to find compassion for yourself, you can find it easier for someone else. And then that in return helps you to experience that compassion in yourself for sure.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully put. Yeah.
Stacie?
Yeah, one of the things that I have really grown to appreciate about Virgo is um, kind of disillusioning the idea of perfection. Um, I've been thinking so deeply about it, and if you really think about it, perfection, it's a myth. And how you know is it's completely antithetical to the state of becoming, right? Because life, it's constantly subject to environment, to changing dynamics, time, context, and so it's our job to create a practice or a routine so that we can respond to all of these factors. And with perfection, it's fine to have a goal for perfection, as long as you understand that perfection isn't real. It's more like the apprentice desiring to master something, right? Which is links to Capricorn. But even the master is going to see imperfection in their own craft. Um, um, so yeah, it's to me, and it kind of demonstrates just humility, the power of humility. I think humility is the most powerful energy in the entire zodiac, because it really opens you up to adaptability, to figuring out what works and what's called for in each moment. And really, that's what perfection is. It's when something is meeting the moment and the environmental conditions. So it kind of reflects back to the fact that it's the inverted pyramid where the ego isn't on top, because perfection is only possible if the environment is supporting and allowing it. And it's only a moment in time. You can't recreate these things. And so it's a fluid, adaptable living process.
I love that. It makes me think of, I think with like a Virgo moon or a moon in the sixth house, sometimes it's like what you're talking about. We run into situations where all of a sudden there's the innocence of experiencing something for the first time. And so you have to give yourself grace. And that is a very humbling experience, right? Of understanding that, or that being reflected back to you. And I love what you said about the environment also, and the state of becoming, because like, how can we ever improve if there's not something to improve upon, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Deva?
Oh, well, just what you guys said, it feels complete, but just to add a little bit, it's that emotional shift too, from my understanding of, focusing on, oh my gosh, this is wrong and that's in chaos and this is what's lacking and everything needs to be cleaned up here, and really going, okay, so if I take this step today, I'll feel that much better tomorrow. And keep making those steps so that you can have that practical measure that things are improving. And as long as that Virgo moon can feel that every day, that conditions are getting better inside and out, then that really creates that emotional shift from always focusing on what's wrong and the procrastination and the imperfection to things going into motion, being in service for oneself and others.
Yes, beautiful. Joe?
Thank you. Yeah. Just kind of adding, as I was listening, when you said, Stacie, about the master seeking perfection and what they do, right? I just widened the picture inside my head and thought, well, there's a kind of master builder that created everything, whatever we call them, God, goddess, creator, whatever. And what I love personally about this Virgo archetype is that it speaks to our personal journey, our evolutionary journey, finding the truth within and finding it in the world around us. But Virgo sits in the chart facing Pisces. And for me, there's always, where there's a kind of axis like that and two signs are looking at each other, it's a little bit like the yin and yang image, where there is 99% of one thing here and 1% of it there. And so I imagine there's this something of creation or transcendence, or there's something about how to work with and free ourselves up from the limitations that we've created by living with and evolving with the archetypes in the first part of the chart. And then it's like, because Virgo is this transitional archetype, and all of the houses and the signs before talk about a lot of the way we begin to learn how we see ourselves and what we need and how we meet our own needs. And then suddenly there's like there's all the other people, and there's relationships, and there's the world, and there's career. And somewhere within that is this massive, bigger picture. And Virgo just sits there in 1/12 of the house, 1/12 of the chart. But I think has so much to offer, if we can just kind of look at it. But it's, I don't know, it just kind of speaks to me. And lovely way, and listening to you reminded me of that. So I think Virgo for me always has something interesting to offer. It's like what's going on here with me, and at the same time, what's going on in whatever the bigger picture would be.
I love
Joe,
that.
it's what you just said, isn't it? It's from that subjectivity. So Virgo's that transition that moves towards objectivity, right? So it goes from the me archetypes to kind of pausing and going, hang on a minute. It's not
Yeah,
just me here, there's others. And so Virgo Pisces being that transitional energy, the mutable energy of adapting from myself to others. That's how I
Mhm.
look at the Virgo archetype as well, in terms of, so it's not just me here in the world. Let's connect to everyone, essentially.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to add something that I've experienced personally that I feel like is really moon in the sixth is, and it really is indicative of what everyone has said, kind of little pieces of it, is growing up, I remember feeling guilt, shame, all of the things that can come up with a moon in the sixth house. And let's face it, all of my Capricorn. But I remember the first time was, I asked to be put in therapy. I was 12 years old. And I remember that I absolutely loved it. And it made me feel like, oh my gosh, I can fix something. And then I would find everything that I needed to fix, and I was, surprised, not really, that there was always something else to do. But because of that, later on, I would be able to give that back to people. Some little nugget that I found out or I was able to unlock inside of myself. Recently, I've just had that. Me and Stacie had a conversation recently about Virgo that really helped me. And ever since then, I've been like, it like unlocked something where I felt something wasn't quite working, and I was confronted with it. And then all of a sudden, I'm able to, it's also because it's about adaptability. Sometimes you have to really strive to figure out what is going on inside, even if you don't want to. And it's doing that Virgo-like work, even if it feels like painful, because it is humbling, and it is because of that polarity of Pisces. You sense that there's something more, right? There's
Mm.
something more to this, but you don't really understand it at the time because it feels Piscean, or you're so stuck in focusing on this one little minute thing that you can't get unstuck from. And then it takes, whatever it does, and once it's unlocked, it really helps with the Virgo feeling of, oh, well, I can correct this. And then the gift of Virgo is that you know that eventually it's going to be something that you can share with other people to help them later on. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a Leonard Cohen quote that there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. So it's like you go through that, and then
Yes. Yeah.
all of a sudden there's the Pisces polarity. And anyway,
Yeah. And that's when you get to experience the divinity. Because
yeah.
when you get to experience the array of emotions that do get to come up once it's unlocked, right? Instead of focusing on that one little emotion, I feel like. So, well, do we have anything else to add to our favorite things about Virgo moons? No? All right, Sue, we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to hand this one off to
Mm.
Stacie because this is where I forgot to put, instead of power animals, I forgot to put canine. Sorry. None of us caught that. Whatever. And my Virgo's kicking in right now. I'm like, oh, I just saw it. But anyway, Stacie, an animal friend that connects to Virgo, how about you tell us why you chose this and then give us all the deets?
Okay, well, I chose canine for the animal to feature in Virgo because it's a species that humanity has
Right, yeah.
really spent a lot of time over time domesticating, and they've become so integral to our lives. Um, dogs are also they're very being pack oriented. They're very oriented to function, and so they're very sensitive to the roles that they play and where they fit into the pack. And so they subservience and humility is something that they imbue in a natural kind of way. It's not like, oh, I'm less than. It's more like, I honor that you, the alpha, you're playing the dominant role here, and I'm, not going to challenge you. So they kind of fall in line in that way. They being routine oriented, they are very helpful with their relationship with humans. It's been shown that people who own a dog, they're more likely to be active, so they'll go outside and get fresh air, which is then going to improve your health, your sleep, your mental state. Dogs love to help. They love to help. They help in so many different ways. One of the most moving ways that I can think of is just the emotional support that they offer. It's like a quiet, silent support and affection. And this comes from their state of pure emotion. They're not assuming. They are extremely adaptable, emotionally adaptable and resilient. I think of, for example, the dog that I have now, Sam, a Great Dane. He was rehomed, and he didn't spend a lot of time being a victim of the fact that he was moved into this completely different environment with a different person. He kept moving forward, and that is such a lesson that I feel that we can take from dogs, just their willingness to be adaptable and to work with the moment. Let's see, they are very trainable, which reflects humility. They love to receive praise. They love to perform a job and then receive the praise. They provide so many different forms of service. We have them to help lead the blind. I was watching a special on a woman who had a traumatic brain injury, and she had a Great Dane that she would use to lean on as she walked. They'll help a hunter retrieve small game. They protect vulnerable animals such as maybe chickens or sheep, and a variety of other things. They are unparalleled for playing a service role as a visitor, whether it be a hospital or a senior center or anywhere where there are emotionally troubled people, someone who could just benefit from some levity, because dogs really have a talent at providing that. There's just something about a dog. If you're out walking your dog, it's like your neighbors, all of them will wave. If you don't have your dog, a lot of people will turn the other way. But if you have your dog, it's suddenly everyone is so disarmed and approachable. And so I find that a precious benefit. One interesting fact, I remember growing up, I would hear a lot about, oh, we don't let the dogs inside because they're going to spread germs. It's going to make us sick. And actually, the opposite is true, because what happens is there was a study where they learned that dogs harbor what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Microorganisms. And so they will expose a family to various diseases at a micro level, which allows the family to then develop some immunity, which makes them stronger. So they are, in fact, good for our health. Crotch sniffing. This is the analytical part of the Virgo brain. They can detect so much information, and what they're doing there, this is an area, everyone knows the experience of a dog coming up and snitching your crotch. And it's because that's where epicrine, am I saying that right? Epicrine glands are emitting pheromones, which give the dog information such as reproductive status, health, emotional state, all kinds of things. And then the last point that I want to kind of talk about is guilt. They are capable of both learned guilt and natural guilt. I'll give an example. It's not my finest moment, so it's kind of a hard memory to recall, but it really illustrates. I had a Labrador before my current Great Dane, and she had this habit of grinning, which means like, when you'd come in or she'd see someone new, she would just grin and, and the first time I saw that, before I had really recovered a lot of my daemon qualities, I misinterpreted that as baring teeth. And so I would yell at her and say, no, don't, and I would just get really stern with her. And so she would reflect the learned guilt of being yelled at by tucking her tail and, bowing her head. But yet she couldn't stop herself from doing that because dogs are pure emotion. And so she would do that. And it didn't take long before I realized, like, what was I thinking? How sad it, like, I don't know if I will ever get over that mistake. But so that's an example of learned guilt. They can absolutely learn guilt. They are also very capable of natural guilt. And just a quick example, my Great Dane, if I leave the house, without fail, he will go to the garbage can, and if I've forgotten to secure it, I'll have garbage all over the floor. If I have bread on the counter, the bread will be gone. And as soon as I come back home, walk in, he will just avoid me. He'll avoid me. And if I let him out to go potty, he won't come back in. And it's because he knows that he did something wrong. I don't even have to say no or what have you done. I can completely ignore it, and he is still manifesting that natural guilt, which I think is precious. So anyhow, I just wanted to open it up to everyone else to share your thoughts about dogs and Virgo.
Stacie, I love it. My dog, I don't know if you guys can see, is right there. And I think people see him and my cat usually in the background of my videos all the time. But my dog, he experiences, I just want to share and validate everything that you're saying, not that you need me to, but my dog is a rescue dog. And my dog came into my life at a really pivotal moment. It makes me want to get really emotional, actually. And I remember before I got married, my ex-husband was like, your dog can't sleep on the bed. And I remember looking at him and telling him, this dog is probably going to be here after you. Like, and guess what? This dog is here after him. And they're just the most, the comfort that I get whenever there's no one else around. My dog Dexter does that for me. Like, he just knows. He'll come and lay in my bed, even with my kids when something's going on. If they're crying or whatever, he'll come and lay beside them, and he'll like just kind of lay his body on them. And he sleeps with my son now. And he does experience natural guilt. I think that something really terrible happened to him before I got him. I know that he was at the ASPCA for over 10 months. And I will tell you, it was a connection that I've never felt with another animal besides my horse. When I had this feeling to just go in there one day, because I wanted to pet the dogs, and I went around, and he was the last dog I saw. And when I tried to leave, he reached up and hugged me, and I was like, it's over. I'm taking you home. And but the guilt thing, I will come home and if like Zeppelin, my youngest, leaves like a bag of chips or something out, and nobody noticed and grabbed it, usually it'll be in my room too. I have hardwood floors and I'll be walking to my room and like usually Dexter is like right next to me, right? I'll hear him tiptoeing behind me, like waiting, like, oh God, she's about to find out. So I just wanted to like, I don't know, add to the stories of I think that that's also someone who has a lot of sixth house or Virgo. They might be more inclined to want to have a pet um and that it could be really healing for them as well. So, do you guys have other things to add to this?
Well, just to dovetail a little bit, I've also heard stories where children, specifically with autism, that they are bonded with animals and they become a support system for them so that they can ease emotional trauma and tension, and that they then have a better, easier time with other people. So it's like their animal companions, whether it's a dog, a horse, or whatever they find. It opens up an emotional space to where um, they feel safe, or they feel that sense of perfection perhaps within themselves, that they feel good to come out and to say hi and meet up with you, say hi to people or Joe or whoever it is, which is really hard, of course, when you have autism. And so it's like that connection to animals helps in emotional cleansing or an emotional healing.
That,
David, that reminds me when
yeah.
I grew up with German Shepherds. So I've grown up with dogs, and I remember when my brother was born, and he was born in Canada, so he came to the UK when he was around 3 months old, and we had a German Shepherd, and my mum was petrified. My mum
Oh,
was like, we're gonna, yeah. She was just like, no, he can't go near him. And one day, my brother was on the floor, just lying down. Our German Shepherd literally slowly crawled over, put his head down like this right next to my brother's head, and then kept looking at
oh,
my mom to kind of say to my mom, he's my brother too. That literally bowled my mother over. To that day, literally the bond between my brother and our dog was literally beautiful. But that's such a strong memory. You talk about connection between kids and animals and kids. It's pure emotion. It's pure unfiltered emotion. As we grow up and become adults, we end up having expectations and how animals are, but kids don't have that, and animals don't have that. And it's Stacie, what you mentioned, that natural bond that exists, and it is beautiful. Such a lovely memory that I have to this day. But yeah, dogs are just a whole different kind of connection.
I love that. Before we move forwards, that both of Dava, you just reminded me of something too, is even other species of animals, like at zoos. I know that there's this woman, I forget at what zoo it is. She had to take care of like cheetah cubs and they had no confidence. And so she brought in her golden retriever, and that dog played the role of helping them achieve confidence, right? Of just like being around them. That way they didn't feel so shy anymore and they could start doing things and coming out in their enclosure. And dogs are healing. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, Joe, do you have something?
Yeah. Some of my closest and best friends have been my dogs. And I'm going to, people who've been in a relationship with me of some kind over those years will know already that, right or wrong, the dog always comes first. Probably seen prospective potential life partners off because they knew they were taking a second place. And I grew up without dogs, without any animals in the house. My parents just weren't keen on the idea at all. And one night, because we were kind of quite involved with our church, and we'd often go out delivering leaflets and things. And as I got older, I was, given the job of going out and doing this. And I'm walking around. It was the year John Lennon got shot. I remember that because I had a radio and I was listening to this. And this dog, this, oh gosh, what was it called? I can only think Lassie at the moment. What are they called, those dogs? They're beautiful.
Collie.
Anyway, Collie, thank you. Yeah. This Collie starts following me out of nowhere. I'm just stood there, and suddenly this nose comes up under my hand, wet nose, and I jumped. And it had this long bramble, like a plant with thorns on, and it was stuck in this long collie hair. And it came over and just nudged my hand, and I knew immediately just to look, and I saw it, and I pulled it out. And I'd only just started delivering the leaflets. I had about an hour, 2 hours to go, and it followed me all around the kind of area we lived in. And I started to feel guilty at the end. You talk about Virgo and this guilt, because I knew I had kept it with me because it made me feel good. And I'd walked it away from the street corner where I found it, which might be where it belonged. And I got back home. And my dad opened the front door as I was about to come in, and he went, "Dog, it's not coming in here." And I said, "Okay, Dad." And I patted it bye-bye, and I got back in the house. And then my dad was kind of wandering around, right? And he would have normally gone back to doing what he was doing, but he was wandering around. And he said to me, "Did you give it a biscuit?" And I said, "No, you told me not to." And I felt like in this moment, what the encounter with the dog offered me was an opportunity to find my own truth. Yeah. So dogs are so honest that I can't help it when I kind of connect with one, I discover I know the truth of what I'm supposed to do, right? What my parents expect, what society expects. But then there's the truth of what do I want? What do I need? Who am I? Where am I going? It's the whole big picture. And it was that kind of moment. And I never saw that dog again. I'm sure it was okay. It's such a beautiful dog. Someone who wasn't living with their mum and dad, right? And it was okay to live with my mum and dad because I was only about 16, something like that. But in that moment, and this been with me for what is it? Well over 40 years. Anyway, this one encounter with the dog, and all the other dogs that have come into my life, most of them have been rescue dogs. And in an instant, I look at them and they look at me, and we just kind of get each other. And I think if you've never had a dog in your life, it's just kind of like maybe you're missing out on something incredible and special.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Joe. Right, Sue, can we go to the next slide? All right. We're here to talk about the strengths and vulnerabilities and what nurtures and empowers a moon in Virgo or a moon in the 6th house. And I think that we've listed a lot of the strengths. There are a few vulnerabilities that one with a moon in the 6th or Virgo can experience. And some of the ones that come to mind are there's definitely the victimized dynamic that can come up. I've even experienced it whenever I, maybe wasn't being aware of it and all of a sudden getting confronted that I was in that mindset because I'm focusing on, how do I explain this? I think whenever you have a moon in the 6th house or in Virgo, you're working so hard. I can speak personally. You're working so hard to improve, and you have you're looking at all of these things, but if you get stuck and something happens externally, you can turn that what was going on inside of you outward. And that actually keeps you stuck in more of a victimized place of paying attention to every little tiny nuanced thing of, well, if this didn't happen, or, well, this person was doing this, it can really get you in a mental trap. Virgo is very mental, and it's on a very internalized level, and it can become really uncomfortable. And that's where it can create a non-growth situation until you figure out or you have some type of confrontation that really gets you to snap out of it. And then you can start moving forwards again. So it's almost like the inner criticism, if it's not being worked on constructively on an internal level of giving oneself grace and kind of pulling in that polarity of Pisces or the 12th house, it can really get to where you start turning that into criticism that then becomes projected onto other people. And so I think that that's a vulnerability that someone with a moon in the sixth house or in Virgo can have. Like I said, I've experienced it. And guess what? It's a very humbling experience when you get confronted with it. Like, because then you're like, oh, it's like a clinching moment. Like, I think the other thing about this moon placement is you're constantly Virgo, because it is naturally ruled by Mercury, and it is the inner expression of it. So the yin energy, again, it's about trying to become inwardly realized, right? Like you're really striving to have that some type of release. I think that from my experience and what I've seen from others is that I'm kind of losing my words. That most often at the essence of whatever's going on is some type of belief system, right? Some type of way that we've been classifying in a Mercury way, um, something going on. And so it has this dynamic of also confronting you with some type of limited belief in order to improve upon it, in order to move more into that 12th house Pisces place of there's more to this than what I thought that there was. So that's something else. It's a strength and a vulnerability, I feel like. Um, Deva, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, it feels complete. It's one. It sounds like that in terms of the vulnerability, it can be that focus on crisis and lack, but that in a strength in terms of shifting that from a disempowered to an empowered state, using a crisis for self-knowledge or for healing purposes. Like, okay, and in terms of what you were sharing, just because this happened, or let's say whatever is linked to, whatever is creating that feeling of shame, guilt, imperfection, lack, I can't do it, this problem, that problem, that when you go through that crisis, there's that Piscean polarity of here's the bigger understanding, here's the broader understanding. It's that I'm shifting from this to this. And it doesn't mean XYZ. It doesn't mean that I can't. It doesn't mean that I'm not good enough or impure enough. It just means I've got to take those steps. All it means, one step at a time, that really practical Virgo, humbling approach, that stumbling towards ecstasy. I love that expression. But that you can see that it's not the belief system. It doesn't mean XYZ. It just means that there's that Piscean polarity point, and to shift emotionally speaking from Pisces to Virgo in those ways.
Beautiful. Joe, do you have anything to add?
I just jump into what you were saying, Deva. As you said, stumbling towards ecstasy, and I never thought of those words combined like that. I thought, I used to I hold a lot to Ram Dass's phrase that we're all just walking each other home. And I think stumbling towards ecstasy says it in the same but a different way too. We're all perfectly imperfect. Yeah. And the value of our human experiences, the good, the bad, whatever, is that we have the experiences, and through that we discover a new way of understanding the word truth. Yeah, if that makes some sense, that everyone's maybe looking for truth or the right answer or the correct answer sometimes, and it's the exploration. I think this archetype of Virgo offers this to us because we look out into the world and we look back into ourselves and continually beginning to refine our understanding of what this means. And if we can say that we're perfectly stumbling towards ecstasy, and it's okay, because who isn't doing that? It's sort of liberating. I think a little bit of liberation goes a long way, particularly with the kind of mercurial influence with Virgo, in that I know some people, they're thinking all the time, and it's very, very, very left brain. And bringing animals in for something, or anything tactile that takes you out of your left brain, and you begin to see the world and experience the world, right brain, different polarity through your body. That is, Virgo offers such a wonderful reset after we gain momentum with our think. And as westernized people, don't we strive to demonstrate how we get it right, what we know, that we've found a problem and we can see a problem, we fix a problem, and yet all of the sharing of information or the process that goes on to get there doesn't always get quite as valued. So I don't know. I think I'm discovering more and more about the Virgo archetype and how it's an oasis of exotic enchantment of great little things. It contains all the wonderful stones that we need so we can trip over them and stumble forwards.
Thank you, Joe. Stacie?
First thing I think of is there's just such an incredible learning opportunity in Virgo, relative to understanding natural law. Because, in Gemini, you have phenomenal reality. And, in Sag, we have the natural laws that make it all come together. In Pisces, we have the collective ecosystem. And in Virgo, it's where we can apply the information that we gain through observing life and interacting with it, in order to learn new techniques, in order to understand problems. And so that's one of the big things about Virgo is application. You can make a mistake and learn a lesson and see what you did wrong, but if you don't then apply a correction, then it doesn't move anywhere. So that's what I think of.
Rob?
Do you know what? Just to add, there's one thing that being a Virgo sun sign, I know it's completely different to the moon sign, but just having a lot of Virgo, there's also that emphasis of self-forgiveness. You can have that inner criticism. You can have those feelings of lack, but being able to kind of forgive yourself as well and not hanging on to those feelings of lack, void, all the negative connotations that a Virgo moon can embody. And it's Jeffrey said this a lot, and it's one of my favorite Virgo slogans is the value is in the effort. And it's exactly what Stacie said. It's you're putting in the effort and knowing you're putting in a genuine effort, and forgive yourselves. And there's a new moment. There's going to be a new day to just that one step at a time process, and things will move on. And we're all learning, and we're all deciphering, and we're human, so it's not always going to be hunky dory, and we've got to get that balance right between. There's going to be days where things don't feel great. You're going to have those feelings of lack, but honor those feelings, move through those feelings, and move through that emotional body and release them, because through holding on, that's what's going to cause more pain. So I think there's a huge, huge strength in a Virgo archetype is the ability to transition, to the opposite side of the key word is forgiveness. So yeah, that's what I would add to that.
I love that. I think that the only thing that I don't want to forget to speak about whenever it comes to strengths and vulnerabilities for this moon is there can be like this dynamic of where one is denying their own emotions, right? Or whenever they're denying their own emotions, that means that they're excusing other people's behavior. Um, and not always. It can, one can just not want to feel, right? It can be very, very painful. Um, and that's where I feel like crisis can come in sometimes, and guilt. And it's really important for someone with this placement to understand the difference between natural or earned guilt and also learned guilt. I know that for me, whenever I found EA, when I learned about like sadomasochism, I was blown away. And I was like, I was in 22 years of therapy and no one ever told me about this. Like, I was like, this all makes sense now. Um, but it's something that does need to be jettisoned from within. And so I can say personally, whenever I'm feeling guilt, I will ask myself that question, is this learned or is this natural? And the best way to understand that is, you know, is am I feeling guilt for things that I have learned to feel guilty for? For me, um, my moon is in Libra. So for me, it was around if I held a boundary with someone, I was made to feel like ashamed and guilty for saying no. And I had to really learn through the crisis that I experienced in my life that I didn't have to feel that way anymore. And that was liberating. And natural guilt will always stay with you. I have siblings. I remember in high school, man, I have a tongue like a sword, and I would get really hurt and I would say things to my siblings to intentionally hurt them. And that is something that I do still carry with myself. And guess what? I don't do that anymore because the amount of guilt that I felt after doing that and seeing how hurt that they were bothered me deeply. And that's something that you will carry with you to teach you the lesson. You don't do that again. Whereas the other, it's something that once you realize this was learned, it does go away. Then you just have to work in a very Virgo-like way of, kind of peeling back the layers of the onion as each kind of time something like that comes up, asking yourself again, oh, well, this is a similar situation with a root cause. And I know this is not something that I need to feel guilty about. And essentially, it is getting into like the pure emotion, of needing to actually feel whatever it is that's arising so you can come to a deeper awareness. Like Virgo to me, Virgo square Sag is where one can really experience an inner gnosis, and that can only come through um, allowing yourself to feel the full array of pure emotion within Pisces. So I did want to add to that before we moved on. All right, Sue. Okay, so we chose Zac Efron. He is firmly in the first stage of individuated. And I wanted to give just a little bit of background information. And then Deva, I'll let you hit it off if you don't mind. So Zac Efron was born in California to Jewish parents who did not practice religion. He he definitely says he's Jewish, but he says that he is not religious at all. Growing up, he found an interest in, um, oh my gosh, acting, and he started acting at the late age of 11, and he was in a lot of plays, and he had a teacher, whenever he was in high school who really saw something in him dealing with his acting and like his talent. And she was a friend of an agent who lived out in California. And she told this agent about him. And so he had his big break in the movie High School Musical on the Disney Channel. He was like known as the teen heartthrob. This was back in 2006, whenever he was 18 years old. And he's played in numerous movies. He's also struggled with addiction and has talked about it. And then um, in the 2010s, him and his then girlfriend had visited Australia and stayed there for a time in the town of Adelaide, I want to say is what it's called. And he fell in love with the country and then came back to the US, was doing more movies. And at the time of COVID, he was doing a movie out in Australia. And so he rented a property out in Byron Bay. And he also was excited about it because it was getting away from COVID because they had so much strict laws around masking and quarantining in Australia. And so that's why the death rates were really low there. And he learned to really fall in love with the Aboriginal people. And he started a docu-series on Netflix, which is I love it, especially the second season called Down to Earth. And in the first season, he is really just he's traveling to different places all over the world, and he's speaking to things about regenerative farming or, talking about having healthy water systems and just all different types of dynamics that are really speaking to being a good steward of Earth and Earth's resources. And then in the second season of Down to Earth, he is there in Australia and he is really trying to teach people about the Aboriginal ways, speaking of even the Aboriginal ways of keeping fires from breaking out and how the government systems impeded upon the Indigenous people there from doing that and really wanting to bring light to that. And I'm sure I'm forgetting so many different things, but the second season is amazing. And you can tell that there's a lot of growth that he had and his love for the people of Australia, and so much so that in 2021 he moved there permanently. So Zac Efron has this, beautiful Virgo moon in the eighth house, and I'm gonna let David kick this off, unless I forgot something to add to this. Did I? Anyone?
No,
No?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
Dava, I'm gonna let you kick this off, and then, we can go from there.
Did we all agree that it seemed like he was in the first stage individuated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. From what I understand too, and from what you've shared, it would seem that he's really being drawn to improve, or to create situations, help situations get better, through communicating new ideas or through communicating things in a new way that are around how to include a diversity of points of view, seeing that this South Node is conjunct Mars in Libra in the ninth house. The North Node is then Aries in the third house, and Pluto's in the 10th with Venus Mercury. So it's like a way of purifying or perfecting through showing these different people and what they're doing to make things better, to purify, to perfect. Also creating a humbling in terms of things that we never thought of. And being able to, in that way, ground into a resource that's perhaps more connected to the emotional body, in terms of really listening to the people around and um, seeing that South Node, Libra in the ninth, and the Pluto in the 10th. How are they structured? What are they doing? And to kind of taking the best of what he found from what I saw. Um, and that's a new way to a new way for him uh, a new role in the world, seeing that Venus Mercury conjunction and the polarity point being in Taurus in the fourth. Perhaps it's a way for him to share a new part of himself too, in terms of that Virgo's desire to help, to be of service, and to purify in general. So I kind of saw that in terms of showing also a new side of himself, and that desire to self-improve and improve conditions for others.
Stacie.
Um, well, one thing that has not been mentioned is his relationship status. And it's interesting because he has been open about the fact that he is prioritizing self-fulfillment over a relationship. And that just really goes into the evolutionary intention because, with that Pluto Venus, I mean, they are same degree conjunct. So there's a lot of inner work, inner metamorphosis that needs to occur, 10th house over time. So this is a process, and it's going to take time for him to discover himself and feel safe. He has said that kind of the catalyst for his previous addiction was the pressure of being in the public spotlight, and all of the attention, the messages, the pressure caused him to go that route. And so he has dealt with that, and progressively he is spending a lot of time in nature, in culture, finding himself, expressing himself. Jordan, you mentioned when you talked about the series Down to Earth, how the second season he really comes out. And I noticed that too. Initially, when I was trying to gather knowledge about him, I had the hardest time putting my finger on the pulse. I'm like, who is this guy? And I started with the first season where in all the scenes, he's just sort of like, oh, that's cool, that's sick, just over and over and over. And I just had no sense of who he was. And then the second season comes along, and wow, he has blossomed. I mean, you can see the growth just between those two seasons where he just seems so much more engaged with the content, and the things that series focuses on in terms of sustainability and just the ecosystem and how we can be kinder to the earth, how we can utilize resources better. I mean, there are brilliant things that are covered. It's highly recommended. And so I think that this is really his key into tapping into who he really is, because that is one of the essential questions. Who am I? 10th house, what am I here to offer the world? And I think he's really finding it as he orients to natural law and health and that kind of growth.
Absolutely. Rob?
Yeah, you know what I noticed when I was just researching on him, because of course I'm aware of him and through the Disney movies, then moving towards more serious roles in his life, is when I was looking at his Wikipedia page, he has a whole section under health issues, right? So you look at his moon in Virgo in the eighth house, and we know the moon relates to the emotional body. And Virgo being the crises element, he has experienced a lot of crises in his health, right? Like you mentioned, Jordan, he's admitted to addiction, he's admitted to having depression, and even one of the roles that he did recently, and we were speaking about it before we started recording, in a movie called Extremely Wicked, where he's playing the role of Ted Bundy. Bundy? Is it Ted Bundy?
Bundy. Yeah.
Um, yeah, he had to seek therapy post the role because he had, embodied himself into the character's, you know, role. That to come out of it, he needed therapy. He's also mentioned that, in that Wikipedia page, it actually states, he's died on a couple of occasions, nearly died on a couple of occasions. He's had life-threatening illnesses. And so you look at that moon in Virgo in the eighth house, it's sort of like his egocentric nature in this lifetime is evolving through the emotional body. It's coming to those crises points in his life and linking it back, in the natural eighth house, which we know is Scorpio related. Look at that finiteness of death, He's kind of metamorphosizing through his emotional body, and it's through these crises that he's experienced. And he does a lot of YouTube shows as well, and one of them is called Killing Zac Efron, and that's when he had contracted a bacterial infection while filming in I don't know where he was filming actually, but he had to be flown to Australia for treatment. And he also had COVID, etc. So it's interesting how that moon in Virgo for himself in that eighth house, he's had to deal with life and death situations. So that's when I was looking at his chart, that really stood out for me.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah. I found it so interesting beginning to explore who Zac Efron is to kind of come together like this today, because I think I first encountered him by way of my kids who watched High School Musical again and again and again, and I saw the same presentation of this of Zac Efron as an actor holding a role again and again and again. And as I was kind of finding out about him, what I realized was I was having the same kind of experience I had when I was prepping and kind of looking at the background for Tom Hanks. Yeah, who everyone will know if they've been watching these, that we were looking at his chart a while ago. And actors, we see them on the small screen, we see them on the big screen or the stage or wherever, and we know them through their roles. And yet I think his Pluto in Scorpio for me is about metamorphosizing, right, okay, look it up, but maybe I've invented a new variation of the word, but morphing,
Metamorphosing.
I'm getting hung up. Thank you. I'm getting so hung up on that. Metamorphing, I'd like metamorphosizing, so I'm going to say it anyway. These limitations to himself and his South Node in Libra, and conjunct the planetary ruler, right, for the North Node. It says he's being drawn back in again to challenge the constructs, the identity that he's created for himself. He's kind of battling against that. And what better way than to be an actor and have to put on a role and play it as yourself or as a script, and then take it off, and then put on a role, and then you go out to the studio, and the whole world says, "Oh yeah, you're whatever your name is from High School Musical, or you're such and such from this." And I didn't know about this show, Killing Zac Efron. How perfect! Yeah, to metamorphosize, to liberate him for himself, from all of these roles. And he had to say yes, didn't he, to playing all the roles. Whether it's because of the role attracted him or the money attracted him or whatever it was, he had to say yes. So he tried that role on, and then he takes it off. And it's now, he's, I think, 37-ish, late 30s, somewhere around there. And getting to kind of get this understanding of who this person is, the truth of him, right? His kind of Virgo nature expressing itself. So I love all of that. And I know we were talking a bit before we started the show, but just to share with people watching that I just felt like I wanted to know, what does his family name mean, right? His Hebrew name. And first place I met, maybe loads of people will know this anyway, particularly if you've been a fan of Zac Efron, right? And there must be a lot of fans. But the family name Efron means singing bird, as I'm given to understand. And isn't he singing his song as he goes through life? maybe changing the tune as he discovers something new about himself. I don't know. I thought that was a nice piece to throw in. He's, I think he's a more interesting guy than I thought he was, because I was in the beginning, I'm just seeing High School Musical.
Yeah, I I feel like something we need to talk about is the stage of evolution that he's at and his Neptune square notes.
Mm.
Is that this is someone who is in the first stage of individuation and is wanting to, with that Neptune there, and then the Pluto, Venus, Mercury conjunctions in the 10th house, is really wanting to get to the bottom of the way he's structured things. And whenever you're in the first stage of individuation, you can really appear like someone in the consensus, but deep inside, that's not what's really going on. And I feel like for him, with that Neptune squaring his nodes there with Ceres and the resolution being the South Node, conjunct that Mars and Libra and the ninth, is the way for him to culminate this is through different cultures and listening to the other people in those cultures that is actually confronting him with the things that he's wanting to improve upon in himself, stemming from coming out of the consensus. It's helping him understand the diversity of others' values and how that can be different from how he was conditioned. And with his moon and Virgo in the eighth house, there have been intense confrontations, but underneath it all, even his work of service, of really trying to put out what he has learned. You can see, like, I mean, even though it's a Virgo moon, he's got the sun in the ninth house. He's wanting to teach this. And he's wanting to teach about how these cultures are equal to other cultures. And this is really indicating his own individuation process. And it's something that's actually being able to fulfill him and to nurture him from within as he liberates from these old dynamics. Um, the other thing I wanted to say is that Virgo correlates with meditation. And the one thing that he really found that helped him after playing Ted Bundy is he found transcendental meditation. And he said that he would actually just do it in the car after he would get done from acting that day on that movie. And so that is something that he said really helped, like, start a process of healing for him on an emotional level. And I think that that's really indicative of that moon and Virgo in the eighth house as well. Yeah.
I
Yes.
wanted to say, it's interesting with all of this Scorpio and, an eighth house moon. I mean, that's a lot of power, which can be expressed in, a lot of ways. But one thing that's interesting about Zac Efron is that those who speak about him um, talk about what a generous, wonderful person he is, when they meet him directly. And I just kind of look at that, in spite of the eighth house and in spite of the Scorpio and the Pluto, you've got that sextile between that Virgo moon to the Venus and the Pluto. And, and of course, the Venus is ruling the Mars South Node in Libra. And so there is that openness to other people and the essential humility of that Virgo moon. Just you can see that there's a real respect for the equality of people's experience. He just seems to imbue that. And there are some skip steps here. Neptune, I'm correct in that the South Node is the resolution node, is that right? Yeah. And so you can see, I keep going back to this Down to Earth series. To me, that is one way that skip step is being recovered because, 12th house, this is, large screen, kind of cinematic teaching, because of course Saturn is in the 11th house in Sagittarius, kind of teaching people about innovative ways to live, and to create a better society that's in harmony with the earth. And so to me, that kind of work is really fulfilling on that skipped step.
Absolutely. I think that that's also a way that, I mean, that skip step is full of different dynamics. I think even whenever we're talking about the pressure he felt as an actor, part of that Neptune squaring that with that resolution being the South Node is him needing to dissolve the expectations of what's expected of him on a social level. And now what he's doing is he's doing something that feels more authentic to him, right? That Jupiter is retrograde. It's ruled by that Mars. So as he is, culminating those dynamics of that doesn't feel authentic, these are your expectations, he's actually using his platform that he has now to be a messenger, Jupiter retrograde in the third house, to teach these more natural, timeless principles that are more rooted in natural law. He's done that with the Aboriginal people, bringing voice to them in Australia. Then you can see with his moon the stewardship that he's doing for the coral reef barrier. Like that is something that is really near and dear to his heart, that he is being very outspoken about, and he's teaching about it's the Virgo Libra principle of that giving, sharing, and inclusion, but also in the space of nature, that everything has a specific function and role. And if the coral reef dies off, then it's going to affect everyone. This is a bigger issue. And so you can see that he's really coming into understanding his own values that have nothing to do with um, uh, what might have been expected of him. And I don't think necessarily from his parents, actually, from what I've seen him talk about, it's more of what society, Pluto in the 10th house, has expected of him. He's a pretty face. He was a teen heartthrob, and he was thrust into these kind of roles. And the way he presented himself was like he just kind of fit, he would play that role even in society. But as he's matured, 10th house influences that Neptune and Capricorn square the nodes. He's really been letting that kind of fall off of him and come into his own and presenting his authenticity in this way of this is who I am. So, yeah.
Jordan, I just wanted to add, because you just mentioned it, that Neptune square the nodes, right? We know that that signature is a skip step, meaning that he's started this process in a previous incarnation. You talk about natural law. So it's something that he's done before. He just needs to do it in this lifetime in a different way that maybe didn't work previously. So yeah, I just wanted to add that for that factor there. But yeah.
Absolutely. All right, if we have nothing more to add, let's move on to the next chart, Sue. All right, Rob, I'm going to let you kick this one off.
Yeah. I actually wanted to add this post because we're doing the Virgo moon, but the fact that we have the nodes of the moon that have just recently shifted from Aries Libra into Pisces Virgo. And the nodes of the moon, if you follow evolutionary astrology, is very much linked to the karmic dynamics that we're all experiencing in life. We're all born with a nodal axis somewhere in our birth chart. And transiting wise, we also have the nodes of the moon shifting through signs and different archetypes. And this shift that we've just moved into was it the 11th? Yes, on the 11th of January. It's an 18-month cycle where we are now embracing the lessons of the North Node in Pisces and the South Node being in Virgo. And as we've just mentioned through this show today, that this archetype is a transitional archetype. So we're all collectively at a point in time that we're looking at embracing the energies of Pisces North Node, which is the future direction that we're all embracing. And I see this as very much as we're now surrendering to the higher meaning of what life is and embracing the lessons of the South Node Virgo, which is our past. So we're learning from our past. So we're just literally looking at what has worked in the past, What lessons can we take forward now in order to continue our evolution individually and collectively? And this chart, Jordan, am I correct in thinking it was the time of the shift, right?
Absolutely.
That it happened. Yeah. So if we just look at this chart, for example, we can see that the moon, which is the bridge point between the south node and the north node, is at 26 degrees of Gemini, and it's in a square aspect. So the moon is square in the nodal axis. So if we just look at this as a snapshot, it kind of gives you a flavor of what the lesson of the next 18 months could be. And I see this, guys, as very much as we're needing to move through the emotional body, but in a way that's a little bit more mental and air related because of Gemini. So maybe we're going to be thinking about what happened, for example, 18 years ago when last time these nodes were in this particular signature. So in order to look at the themes that may come up for us, we can go back in time for that. And just make a few notes. It won't be exactly the same, but you might be able to see some patternings that are coming up. And so yeah, that was one thing that really stood out in this, I was going to say birth chart. Well, technically it is kind of a birth chart, right? Um, that Gemini moon and the ruler of that being Mercury in Capricorn, very much asking us to take responsibility, to take self-responsibility. We can't just keep making excuses if our life's not going according to plan, let's say, right? We have to look back at what we've done, take ownership of any action that we've taken in the past, and something that we need to change possibly going forward. We've had Pluto move into Aquarius, which will now be in Aquarius the next 20 odd years. We're literally collectively and individually liberating from our past. And this whole next 18 months, I really, really do feel is such a transitional point where we can really kind of release the past and move towards more of a collective unity, that oneness consciousness. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to mention this chart. I really do think the nodal shift is a key point in our collective growth as a human species. Anything else anybody wants to add, just so we can start a bit of a conversation?
I was
Um,
just
Oh,
wondering if
go ahead,
anyone.
Stace.
Oh, sorry, Jordan.
Oh,
Just
go
if
ahead.
anyone watching has their birthday, their solar return around this time, it might
Yes.
be really, really useful to you just to kind of look at the chart
Mm.
and to go into it on your own or with someone afterwards, particularly because of the impact of the shift. A shift anywhere creates an opportunity, but sometimes we feel the shift as a crisis. And also you want to find the way to see the opportunity, but also seeing the moon and, if my maths is right, and Mercury is squaring the nodal axis. Is that right? Both of them,
Yeah.
top and bottom. So, this is a freebie, right? So if you're watching this, take advantage of the opportunity, and do a little bit of digging so that you don't get caught in what you're holding on to what you're trying to let go of or reframe or reorganize, and that you can move more sweetly forward and evolve easily on your journey. Because that's the gift of this work, is to see rather the problems or the try to find a word. I'm so good at coming up with words, and when I start talking somehow here, it doesn't happen. Maybe that's the truth of me, is I just want to be quiet and just absorb. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. If this chart speaks to you about your natal chart, your solar return, then make use of it. These shifts offer the opportunity for rapid growth and transformation. And looking at two planets we've been talking about a lot, Uranus, maybe we'll talk about more, but Uranus is at play a lot at the moment, and Pluto. And just think about their names. And these two names have been assigned to elements in the real world that have incredible energetic power. Uranium, plutonium. All right, just think, it's not uranium and plutonium in the chart, but they have something of a similar force. They can be massive agents to catalyze change and facilitate growth for you, for us, for all of us. Okay.
Stacie.
I'm kind of, I've been looking at this kind of from a social science perspective.
Yeah.
You know, with the South Node moving into Virgo, it's coming from Libra, where as a global society, there's been a lot of extremity, a lot of polarization, a lot of imbalance, and a lot of anger. And as we're moving into Virgo, it just seems like I'm personally feeling a shift where the reality of the problems that we have set in motion through the North Node in Aries, something new, a new social way emerging. There's an awareness of the problems, and Rob pointed out the square of the Gemini moon, and to me, that really points to the importance of information during this process. You know, here in the United States, we'll have a new president who is known to not appreciate the free press. And so there is a crisis that we don't know how that's going to look. And so to me, the key in navigating this period is to really, really reflect on that Virgo South Node, looking at the problems that generating from this extremity and this polarization that we're coming through, and like in a real way, break down the problems. You know, for example, the wildfires in California. There's a lot to learn from that. And if you break down the problems, you can find solutions that'll put you even stronger into the future. You know, Pisces, which is more sustainable for everyone. And so, you know, and with the North Node moving into Pisces from Aries, it's no longer about me. Now it's about all of us. We are in this together. It's an ultimate period in time, I believe. I think it's a very important time. So that's what I would add.
Yeah. Deva, I'm gonna let you get a chance before I talk about this, so go ahead.
Oh, I say too, it's a shifting more from perhaps the focus on the minute or all the details or this or that, and communicating more collective solutions or things that we can do, or look that transition from this crisis to that, to look what's going on in the whole, and new ways to communicate solutions, and through breaking it down first and then connecting those dots, and getting a more universal or a more complete picture of potential solutions then, versus that Virgo focus on just this single problem or this crisis or the minutia of things.
Stacie, I'm similar to you. I've been really looking at this on a global level. And maybe because my nodal return is approaching as well. I don't know. I've had a lot of, I don't know, I feel really sad about the things that are going on in the world. I feel like right now, especially with all the Pisces energy, there's some of us that can be feeling more sensitive to this, have been feeling more sensitive to this. And whenever I look at this chart, before I even speak about the South Node, what I want to say is all of these angles are at 0 degrees, by the way. And so, Stacie, it's totally reflecting how this transition of the South Node, or it's not. it should be, but it's not. The accurate chart, I had two of them, sorry, but it is the same chart, it's just 5 degrees off. But in the accurate chart, it is 0 degrees on every single angle for the moment that this happened. And that's really speaking to what was seated during the nodes, South Node in Libra, North Node in Aries. When that happened, Pluto was square the nodes whenever it first occurred. And that was a time for us to act through really recovering that South Node Pluto, South Node in Libra, to look at the extremes that social systems and the patriarchy had played a role in. And when we're looking at a South Node, especially whenever it's ingressing into other signs, I was reading an old lecture of JWG's, and I love, love, love the way that he put this. He said, when you're looking at the transiting South Node, you're looking at re-experiencing dynamics of a South Node in Virgo nature right now that we didn't deal with in the past. It's been seeded into the collective. And that's the apparent issue. So we're re-experiencing that. And the North Node and its ruler are speaking to the choices that are needing to be made. And whenever I look at this chart in the context of just that, I'm thinking about how Pluto is in Aquarius in the 4th house of this chart, and it's conditioned by Capricorn, ruled by that Saturn in Pisces in the 6th. And there's this need for us to liberate from where, on a collective level, we've over-identified with patriarchal conditioning, how we've structured the collective unconscious, Pisces, Neptune. Saturn and Pisces ruling that 4th house is really speaking to the need to improve upon restructuring the collective unconscious through Venus, balsamic to it, also Venus ruling that Uranus. Uranus is Pluto's ruler. The need for us to dissolve and improve upon the values and the beliefs and the delusions around them. And with Uranus in Taurus in the 8th house of retrograde ruling that Pluto, where we're going back to, we need to liberate from the over-identification on an emotional level, collectively, right? We have been South Node denying what's been going on or excusing it. And so we're having to relive this in order for us to Uranus and Taurus in the 8th house to confront these issues, especially around resources, values, beliefs, everything that's wrapped up in this. And so the things that we denied and excused, if we continue to do this throughout the next 18 months, there are going to be triggers that happen that induce crisis. We're already seeing it. And it is for us to get into Virgo, to make a different choice around not excusing it, but to improve, to start taking the action to improve. And that also is indicative of, I want to say this, the moon squaring the nodes. In mundane astrology, the moon is the people. Gemini, there's a choice here that is absolutely and necessary needing to be made on a global level because of not just what's happening politically, but what's happening with the ecosystem. We just lost, loss of community, Ceres and Aquarius, California. But guess what else we lost? We lost pets. We lost valuable wildlife there. We lost, there's a laundry list of it. And what that's indicative of is it's trying to confront us. And there will be more things like this that happen if we don't change and we don't start improving. But that's confronting us with how we have utilized resources in the past, where we've mismanaged Uranus in the 8th house, the power, and not come up with a solution. And we're using it for our own benefit instead of looking at Taurus, the land, Gaia, as something that we're meant to have a relationship with that's functioning as well, that it needs to be reciprocated. And so there is this dynamic of where over the next 18 months, we could start having to have, if we continue to do Virgo the way that we've always done it, denying, excusing this, that, and the other about what's going on, His North Node is going to give us a happy, disillusioning experience. And there's communities that are already experiencing this through the loss of their communities. And so what that's doing is it's confronting people with how do we do something different? And so this is a really important and pivotal time. And when we bring in Mercury, the ruler of that South Node, it is about taking accountability and responsibility for our choices, the people too. And it also is indicative of not giving our authority over to people who do not look at this. We don't want to keep excusing authority figures who choose not to look at this. And so I see with Pluto and Aquarius that a lot could come up around communities coming back around, especially Ceres and Aquarius, to help facilitate this process. And so, yeah, I feel very passionate about this chart on a level that isn't just for humans, but for all of humanity. It's really, really important that we start to do something right now. It was really, really important 18 months ago that we started to do something. It was really, really important that 18 years ago when this nodal cycle happened, we were supposed to do something. So we will relive and have to experience the things that we didn't work on back then.
Yeah, Jordan, just to kind of wrap this up, in everything that you just said, one thing that Jeffrey Wolf Green has said many times is that humanity is not going to change through some kind of collective enlightenment. It's going to take crisis to induce the change. And so we need to find the humility to solve the problems. And as you say, not make excuses and, the avoidance, all of that, it's just time.
Absolutely.
Jordan, I just want to add one more thing. It's just because,
Yeah.
me and you both have a very strong Virgo energy. That South Node in Virgo, it's doing that Virgo in a different way, but it's also forgiving yourself for any guilt of not doing something previously, maybe. Just knowing by taking action now and collectively, we all need to do our bit. And like you said, Pluto and Aquarius, it's the community and the tribe that will come together. You know, that whole thing, your vibe attracts your tribe. You
Mhm.
know you're doing the best and the genuine good for the whole of humanity. Like you said, not just humans, every single living sentient being on this earth. That's the way we're going to step forward and make change. So yeah,
Absolutely. And
a
I do
powerful
feel
chart.
like I feel like some people, it makes me think of the Mr. Rogers quote, look for the helpers. You know, I feel like there are some people that atonement is such a thing of Virgo, and
Mm,
atonement happens for various reasons, whether it be natural guilt or learned guilt. And I feel like there are people who can become helpers regardless of what type of guilt that they're carrying as well, I think is really, really important. There can be some people at this point in time who are activated and they don't want through a disillusioning experience, they could come out of the woodwork and want to inform people. I believed this, and now I've contributed to this, and so how can I make a difference? I also feel like with this, I feel like there are going to be souls, and I could be wrong. This is just something I feel deeply. I feel like there are going to be souls who have been hiding that are now going to be called to come out of hiding. And that's part of like, especially when Neptune moves over the North Node and enters Aries, it's like it reminds me of Estrella energy. Like they can't look at this or watch this anymore, but they're here. And so they're going to choose to act on this and to try to implement something. So there are going to be helpers. It's
yeah,
just there is going to be crisis for sure. So
yeah, yeah. And doesn't that Neptune move into Aries in the summer? Am I correct?
no, it
Wait,
moves in March.
is it,
It moves
is it March?
before
Okay.
Saturn. Saturn moves in May.
Oh, okay. Because I know there's going to be a retrograde back as well, but yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay, Sue, let's get to our last chart and wrap her up. All right, here is the Leo moon that is happening. Oh my gosh, next month. We did this one a little bit late, so we're doing next month's full moon. And I'm just gonna point out a couple of things that I saw, and then you guys can continue the conversation. But I find this energy of Leo, this Leo moon sitting in the second house, interesting, fascinating. This chart to me, maybe not upon first glance, looks like this, but the more and more I kind of took it in, it is about getting into the emotional body and creatively transforming through self-improvement. And that's really seen with one, the moon is ruled by that sun. The moon and the sun are in a T square to Uranus. That's in the 11th house. And Mars retrograde is in a oh, gosh, what is it? It's
Where
a
is it?
biquintile, I believe. Um, which is speaking, no, it's in a quintile, excuse me, which speaks to creative transformation. And I love whenever I see astrology and it's like, okay, creative transformation is such a Leo Aquarius dynamic. And then we have this um, aspect that is really speaking to this as well. So to me, I feel like this moon is about self-actualizing through strengthening one's inner relationship to self on a personal level. Um, but it's also through this creative transformation of really getting into the emotional body. And especially if something has been suppressed that you're needing to unlock and to look at to become more emotionally self-reliant. You know, Uranus is in Taurus, so it's speaking to this influence of an inner relationship to self. I also feel like on a collective level, this chart is really speaking to society needing to restructure. Again, it's a common theme right now because the ingress of the nodes just happened. So we're getting this full moon that's really also on a collective level showing, you know, where we're needing to liberate from values, where we're needing to make choices of where we've over-identified with different types of leadership roles, where we're needing to improve upon that, um, and where we're needing to really bring in more natural, universal, timeless laws through confronting where we've over-identified with certain values and thinking. And really needing to get back into giving, sharing, and inclusion. So I'm gonna there's so much I could say, but I feel like I took up enough time. So I'm gonna let whoever wants to speak on this speak on it.
I just want to add, I know I just put myself on mute for 5 minutes there. You probably mentioned this, Jordan. Sorry, I just had to step away for 2 minutes. The square that we have to Uranus, right? It's in a first quarter square, right? So crisis in action. So it's exactly what you just said. The crisis is in the action. Are we evolving towards a collective, sharing, caring, inclusion, or are we just looking at self-interest? A moon in Leo it's a great placement for the moon because it can really emphasize creative power, self-actualization, but the negative side can be just being self-focused, right? So the opportunity here is getting that balance right. So I see this as, the Leo being the fire sign and then the Aquarius, the air. We're trying to objectify the creativeness that we have. Are we doing it for a collective good? Are we doing it to help our community get built stronger? Or are we just doing it for ourselves because we want to be at the top of the ladder? So that energy is what I see with this Leo full moon, and the strength of this is let's put our creative power to collective use. And let's step into
Absolutely.
our individuality in that way.
Yeah. Like each one of us has our own resource that could be of benefit for the collective, and it could help to improve if we view it in that way, because it could become a co-creative process that could induce or reflect or shine a light on how everyone is equal and each person has their own thing to bring to the collective community, for sure.
Yeah.
and the need to act on that.
Yes, action is needed.
Deva.
Well, I would say too, seeing that Mars in Cancer, and the Moon in Leo, that building, or to add a little bit to what you guys were sharing, it can be too a re-experience of emotional triggers. So we may be hung up in this problem, or we may be going to do that, and a reaction from another person, or this or that. And seeing that Mars in Cancer retrograde, it might trigger us. And it's through that that we become aware of where we can empower ourselves, or where we can use our potentials or our gifts to their greatest by not reacting to that trigger, but responding. So I can also see it as an element of going back into those old emotional triggers so that we can do just what you guys were sharing. We can bring our best to the table.
Beautiful. Yeah, I found that Mars quintile to the South Node very interesting. And then it is ruled by that moon, and it just beautifully reflects that. Like, there could be so much creative actualization and transformation if we are responsive and not reactive, for sure. Joe?
Thank you. Yeah, I just putting together everything everyone's just said kind of sums up what I wanted to say to start with, which is that there's a lot going on in the world around us and the world within ourselves. And if I jump back in time some way, I remember thinking, it seems like these astrological alignments, these influences, it seemed like, right, so it's just my point of view, they used to come one at a time every now and again. And over the last few years, it just seems, if it is, I don't know, but it seems to me that there's more and more and more all at the same time. And I think when we have a lot more coming at us, a lot more change, a lot more happening, then what we see is how we respond to change. And one of the two things I think that we do as we look out into the world is either to decide that we're going through a crisis or that these are wonderful opportunities. Now, if it's too much, it's a crisis. And so the moon, for me, is my way of seeing who I am to myself. And Leo is all about expression. So if people can put a kind of pin in things and remember to do whatever works for them, whatever works for you. Zac Efron, transcendental meditation, didn't want to get caught up, right, in being Ted Bundy. Maybe he's a method actor. He becomes the part that he plays. But that's exactly what we all do. We become the part that we play. We identify with it. And our moon shows us that. It shows us, in this case, in the second house, I think, we are who we think we are because of what we believe. And so what we have here is an opportunity to see our beliefs, all of our deep subconscious stuff, because the second house, right? You remember its friend over here on the other side of the circle is the eighth house, everything that's suppressed. So it's a wonderful sun in the eighth, moon in the second. If you can find the resources to support yourself, it's a wonderful opportunity to make visible any subconscious stuff that you didn't even know you had. Yeah, someone says to you when you're 3 years old, you're not going to like Marmite. Now, half the people in the world don't know what Marmite is. But this, I know I could go on a subject about Marmite, but I could pick something else. You don't like cheese. Don't try it. You'll never like it. And we absorb this as a belief. Yeah. You're a boy. Don't do this. You're a girl. Don't do that. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for these things to become visible and combine it with Uranus, right? Who's making that square. It is a square. No, am I wrong? Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you. So for me, the key word for Uranus is liberation, all right? In Greece, I've been teaching in Greece for years, and there's a friend of mine, and her name is Urania, and it comes from Uranos, Uranus, the god of the sky. So from that way of looking at it, Uranus shows us everything that's above us. All right. So if you look up to the sky, that's who you are. You define ourselves from that. And Uranus, for me, is offering us an opportunity. And Uranus is in Taurus, right? And Taurus links with the second house. So it's like, how much easier do we want this red carpet rolled out to be? Change feels like a crisis. It does, because you become someone else. You become another version of yourself. And the one thing we're addicted to is our identity and our old story. But who could we all be without the self-limiting beliefs? Zac Efron, right? Within his chart, freeing himself up from all of the limitations that were at some point used to navigate through the world and say, hi, my name's Zac Efron, and I'm an actor, and I do this, and I do this, and I come from this family, and I'm going here, and we all have a story like that. But that story only takes us one place. Yeah, the destiny that links with that past. And if we've learned everything that we need to learn, it's not going to need to repeat in our lives, and we can use this opportunity of the node shifting, of the moon. I talk a lot when I get excited. I do apologize. There's no one in the room here to say, shh, Joe, they've heard enough from you. So find the things, this is what I say, find what supports you, what helps you to take a breath, and let everything else do the work. You know, we're on a path to discovery, and part of that is who we can be, and another part is who we no longer need to be. Yeah?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, my pleasure.
Sue, before we switch the chart and wrap up, I just wanted to point something else out, which is that the South Node is in conjunct its ruler. And the ruler of the South Node is also opposing that moon. So there's a need for us to confront where we're over-identifying with past instances and the need to liberate from the thinking that perpetuates crisis on an internal emotional level. And that is helping us to have the transformative process on an internal level, right? So we can go to the next slide unless anyone has anything else to add. No? Okay. So Rav is the one who helped us out with this quote. And it is by C.S. Lewis. And humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And that is a great Virgo quote. So, Sue, if you will go to the next one. If you guys are interested in understanding the moon and its nodes, our beautiful friend on this panel, Miss Dava Green, has wrote an amazing book called The Moon and Its Nodes in Evolutionary Astrology. It is a wealth of information. I love the way that Dava writes. She has the ability to really, I always say this, without overgeneralizing, she has a way of simplifying it in a digestible way without ever taking the essence of what it is that she's speaking to away. I feel like, again, it's an invaluable book if you're interested on the moon and its nodes. Also, if you are wanting to learn evolutionary astrology, you can go to the School of evolutionaryastrology.com and you can purchase the DVDs and the correspondence course, or you can head on over to jwgaea.org and you can be a part of that message board where we all get active on there from time to time whenever we can, and there's a great community, and you can hear about upcoming evolutionary astrology events or classes. Until next time, we will see you. Bye.